To a wild horse, the flaming skull was an unstoppable threat. Therefore, it called for help, that was now, and to add, the flaming skull was out of luck. A flaming spear, followed by a line of skeletal dogs and soldiers. There were 13 in total, 12 if you didn't count the flaming skull.
How twisted and wrong.
One of the reasons for their bad luck. There was a religious soldier who had seizures at the sight of undead. The flaming spear descended. Odin pushed it aside with his palm. In an instant, flames clung to his hand. Odin swung his arm through the air. A sound of air bursting as he swung his arm. The fire on his hand extinguished and vanished into the air. It wasn't magic. It was a feat accomplished through physical strength and speed. Odin, having deflected the flaming spear, began smashing the skeletons that rushed at him from behind. With a single punch, a skull shattered into bone fragments. The skull broke into roughly 16 pieces and scattered.
That brute.
Even Rem was impressed by the fire-extinguishing feat. Odin continued to smash every skeleton in sight, breaking heads and shattering ribs. He grabbed the spines of skeletal soldiers and ripped them out, using the vertebrae as bludgeons to smash the heads of skeletal dogs. The flaming skull raised its spear high, seemingly aiming for Odin's back. Ragnar, who had been watching, suddenly stepped forward. He took a step forward, drew his sword, and swung it with a twist of his waist. A middle sword technique slash. Ragnar's blade sliced cleanly through the skeleton's neck bone. The severed head fell to the ground. As it fell, the flames attached to it vanished. Thus only the charred, black skull remained, rolling among the vines and short grass. The head stopped as it bumped against a protruding rock. Despite being headless, the flaming skull still flailed its hands and feet.
Ah, damn it.
Rem then stepped in and hacked the remaining parts of the flaming creature with an axe. He chopped and kicked, breaking it apart. Even then, the flaming skull resisted, swinging its spear left and right. Despite being just bones, it was strong. Rem easily ducked to avoid it and swung his axe upward from below. The axe blade, now a flash of light, sliced through the skeleton's elbow bone, and the spear flew through the air. It spun and scattered sparks around. Enkrid shielded his eyes from the flying sparks with his hand and instinctively reached out. The spear was falling right in front of him. He had two choices, dodge or catch it. The spear seemed to fly with some sort of will. Enkrid relied purely on his intuition and caught it instead of dodging. If it got too hot, he could just drop and throw it away. He was confident he could do all of that in an instant. Seeing that the flames on the spear didn't spread around, he calculated that it wasn't a type of fire that would spread. Of course, all these calculations were part of his intuition. Enkrid, trusting his gut, caught the flaming spear. It wasn't as hot as he expected. It wasn't so hot that he had to drop it immediately. Instead of heat, he heard a voice. "Burn, burn to ashes, turn to cinders. Die in the flames." In an instant, the life of a man tied to a cruciform stake and burnt alive flashed through his mind. A man had been burned to death, executed by fire for using magic. There was betrayal by ignorant villagers and a lord who orchestrated it all. Was it some kind of curse? No, it was a bit different.
It's similar to the sword Pell has.
It was a grudge imbued into the weapon, a deathly grudge transformed into human willpower. It seemed similar to the will. Enkrid reflected on the life of the man and accepted his will. He refused. He rejected being burned alive. The grudge in the enchanted spear dissipated and vanished. It was purified by a stronger will. The flames on the spear extinguished with a sudden burst. It was as if it had been dipped in cold water. Though there wasn't even steam, the fire just suddenly went out. What on earth was happening? Odin was the only one who understood the situation. He had known from the start that the weapon was created based on a deep grudge and resentment. He also realized that the flames originated from the weapon, making the skeletons appear to burn. He intended to purify it, enduring the pain required to emit divine energy. Despite the extreme pain that would come from using divine power due to his restriction, he couldn't just leave such a dangerous object alone.
I might faint.
Purifying such a grudge might cause that. Enduring the pain wasn't something he could control at will. In fact, those who had imposed the restriction on Odin intended to prevent him from using divine power at all, but he ignored it and used it anyway. He was prepared to risk fainting and was deliberately dealing with other vile things first. Then Enkrid grabbed the spear, and the flames just went out. All the skeletons had already been dealt with. Teresa stepped on a fallen skull, crushing it with a crunch. In the silence, only the sound of bones breaking echoed. The wild horse watched in silence as well. Rem's voice broke the silence.
Did your hand get all sweaty?
Did he put out the fire with sweat? That made no sense.
Sometimes your head is really admirable.
Jackson remarked. Given his profession, he knew a lot about such things.
Is it normal for that flame to go out?
It didn't seem that way,
What are you saying, crazy wildcat?
Rem said, looking at Enkrid. It was a look demanding an explanation of what had happened.
He said he'd burn me, so I said no.
Damn, is that an explanation? Seriously? Rem, flabbergasted, looked around for agreement. Ragna seemed uninterested, and Audin, understanding the gist, was merely impressed.
How long has it been since he grasped will, and he's already handling it so skillfully?
It was astonishing.
Well, that's good.
Jackson brushed it off lightly. After all, there was nothing normal about what Enkrid did. He considered himself the only normal one here.
Damn.
Rem said, "Let me see that," and snatched the spear. The remaining grudge attacked Rem. Without showing him the past, it merely commanded him to burn to death. Of course, it was just a residue, a feeble resistance. The flames seemed to flicker at Rem's touch, then went out. Audin was surprised again. What was this now? It wasn't suppressed by will.
Someone tampered with this. Can I use this?
Rem muttered to himself, seemingly knowing something. Enkrid didn't bother to ask, what good would it do to know?
Yeah.
He had no interest in the weapon. Rem examined the spear closely and then cut the shaft in the middle with his axe. With a snap, the handle of the enchanted weapon was halved, now the size of a hand axe. Aside from the pointed end suitable for thrusting, it looked like it could be used as a hand axe. Of course, the balance was all wrong.
You could attach a weight to the end of the handle.
Enkrid suggested, and Rem nodded. He seemed quite pleased.
Feels like a windfall.
Rem expressed, and Enkrid nodded. Once again, it was clear that these skeletons were unlucky. Who were the people gathered here? The Mad Company, a group of brute warriors who changed the course of battles. Enkrid sheathed his drawn sword with a smooth motion and spoke to the horse.
Is that all?
The horse hesitated. What were these humans? The skeletons had been a big threat. Upon reflection, this human had once embedded a sword in the head of that dangerous centaur. The horse acknowledged it. It cried out, converting its joy into a sound.
All right.
Enkrid spoke and moved forward. Whose grave was this? It certainly wasn't a poor man's. So what else could there be besides the damned flaming spear and skeletons? There were no signs of grave robbers, likely due to the wild horse herd and skeletons.
Shall we dig a bit?
Specifically around the structure that looked like a wall. When Enkrid spoke, Jackson responded.
There are a few chests inside.
Apparently, Jackson had already scouted the inside while avoiding the fight.
That sneaky cat, always quick with his hands.
Rem praised. Jackson ignored him as usual, and the group moved inside. The ground had been eroded by rain, covered in snow that melted, dried, and hardened under the sun, making the terrain rough. The ground was uneven, and the sharp rocks sticking up were like natural traps. Of course, it was no problem for them.
All right, let me show you something interesting.
Rem stopped walking and swung his axe in the air. From top to bottom, and then from bottom to top. The second swing was different from the first. On the second swing, flames erupted along the axe blade.
How about Fire Axe Rem for my nickname?
He seemed to have figured out how to use it after fiddling with it a bit.
Sure.
Enkrid nodded calmly. If he fought with that, he might go from being the Mad Axemen to the Mad Fire Axemen. He didn't say this out loud. Everyone needs a bit of encouragement now and then.
Nice. I like it.
As long as he was satisfied, they all ignored it and moved to the deepest part of the basin. The ground became easier to walk on, leading to a stable plain. It was quite deep inside. Wondering where the warm breeze was coming from, they saw a chest half open. A gentle warmth emanated from it.
A heating stone? Blessing of the sun god, Lord.
Odin muttered. Enkrid realized that whoever built this tomb had gold coins to spare.
Pack it all up.
Enkrid ordered. Inside the chest, there were no silver coins. It was all gold coins and some items that could be considered relics. Starting with the heating stone, Said to be blessed by the sun god, there was also a bandage that had a metallic feel to it.
A precious item.
Jackson said, someone who rarely showed interest in anything that wasn't a dagger crafted by an assassin who had staked their life on it. So, it truly was a valuable item. Enkrid examined the thick black bandage. It was as wide as his palm, and there wasn't much of it. If you wrapped it up, it would be enough to cover a torso.
It's made by specially treating the hide of a soft beast into a form that wraps around the body. You can think of it as inner armor.
Jackson explained. There were no other particularly special relics. There were some glowing stones, but since everyone had good night vision, they weren't of much interest. There were also some boots and gloves, but they were damaged, and a few jewels along with a journal. The journal's contents were nothing special. It was full of unbelievable adventure tales, like riding a Pegasus. The reason for settling in this land was simply because it was a friend's hometown, according to the journal. It ended with something like, "Here lies someone who wandered their whole life without a home, now resting here." Enkrid felt that the person buried here, the one who wrote the journal, was expressing their satisfaction with their life and adventures by crossing out their name with charcoal. The journal was filled with words expressing the writer's dream of adventuring and discovering marvelous and mysterious things in every place. Enkrid saw a bit of himself in those words, a person moving toward their dream. However, this person had achieved his goal and was satisfied, which is why he found his friend's hometown, and by erasing his name, he expressed his fulfillment and departure from this life.
Is it romantic or just foolish?
After all, romance and foolishness are often separated by a thin line. There was even a swordsmanship teacher who used to say that. Enkrid was simply reflecting on himself. It was, of course, a bold assumption, not really important. He took the journal. For some reason, he liked it. Meanwhile, Jackson had examined the surrounding walls and mechanisms, but found nothing hidden. He had once been trapped in a similar situation and had acquired the sword he now held back then. But this place was open to the sky. It was a peculiar terrain. It might have been designed to be open to the sky even before the ground had collapsed. That's probably why the chests and other items were so well preserved. The horse approached. Enkrid placed his hand on its forehead.
Is it enough now?
The sun was already setting. Thanks to the heating stone, it wasn't particularly cold. It wasn't just the heating stone. Considering the flaming skull, it seemed like this place was designed for travelers to rest. Jackson mentioned that he saw strange symbols on the walls.
He's a weird guy.
Enkrid thought. The journal also mentioned why the skeletons were created. There should be challenges in an adventure. I hope anyone who finds this place can overcome these. Then take my legacy and use it well. Having read the journal, Enkrid found nothing extraordinary about the so-called legacy.
They are expensive and good items, though.
According to the journal, weren't there supposed to be legendary relics or sacred artifacts? In any case, the rest of the adventurer's belongings had been scattered across the continent, given away here and there. Oh, and the journal mentioned that this wasn't his only grave. If you're a true explorer, find my other graves too. Although the man was eccentric, Enkrid's heart raced at the thought of someone chasing their dreams. It was fascinating.
Let's sleep here tonight and head back tomorrow.
Enkrid said. The tomb served well as a resting place. The unseasonable warmth seemed to encourage rest. He also wanted to give the horse some time to part from its herd.
Let's do that.
Rem agreed, seemingly indifferent. In his left hand was the fire axe, and in his right, the heating stone. While the heating leather was also a valuable item, that stone could warm up an entire tent. A high-ranking noble would pay a fortune for it. Despite its value, no one here had a keen sense of money. Enkrid had given it to Rem since he was more sensitive to the cold. Ragnar remained uninterested. Auden began to pray. Jackson sat with his eyes closed. And Teresa and Dunbachel were equally indifferent to wealth. Neither of them cared about Krona. They were preoccupied with their changed lives and the future ahead. Night fell, and without a campfire, they lay down and looked at the sky. The starlight poured into the tomb. It was a fantastical night view, unlike anything Enkrid had ever seen. He lay under the blanket of starlight, feeling the gentle warmth enveloping him. With his eyes closed, Enkrid met the ferryman. The ferryman, as always, mocked him with a mix of sneering.
You always end up playing with someone like me.
Enkrid wondered if this was a compliment. The dream was short. Torres heard a strange cry coming from the forest long after Enkrid had left.
Shouldn't we send support?
A soldier, unaware of the situation, asked, and Hyun from the guard unit answered instead.
Support? Those 4 monsters could probably roast an entire territory.
Hyun, a swordsman from the northern tribes, had a strong sense of pride. His words carried weight. Torres agreed.
They'll come back on their own.
Who's worrying about whom here? Torres ordered his soldiers to gather the centaur tendons and intact beast hides, then burned the remaining corpses.
How many have died?
Dozens had died in the previous battle, and in the first battle, Torres himself had almost died. Zimmer almost perished alongside him. It had been that perilous. Torres personally felt that running away might have been the right move. In fact, Torres had made such a suggestion.
Lord Captain, if we stay like this, we're doomed. Locking the castle gates and holding out is also limited.
Though they had a watchtower, there was no moat. What if the centaurs came and kept pounding on the walls with those huge clubs made from entire trees? What if they waited for reinforcements and they didn't come?
So, if we give up the castle walls, do you have a solution?
The Lord asked in return. There was none. Outside was even more dangerous. The monsters were called centaurs. They were fast. Evading them was harder than holding out within the walls.
We were trapped on all sides.
The only option was to request support. It was a centaur colony. The leader was an unusual individual that made one's knees tremble. When it roared, it made your balls shrink. There were soldiers who actually wet themselves. Yet, such a crisis was resolved by fewer than 10 people. Whoosh! Tick, tick, tick. The bodies of monsters and beasts, and 3 dead soldiers. One had slipped and been crushed by a beast's foot, and 2 had died showing off their eastern valor. Only 3 had died. The estimated number of monsters and beasts killed was unknown. It was estimated to be at least 200. The madman platoon didn't kill most of them. They were merely the spearhead, the blade that slashed through. The soldiers killed the rest of the monsters and beasts. It wasn't a sunny day. Looking at the sky, it seemed like snow might fall. After an entire day, after tidying up the battlefield and taking a nap, Torres saw the returning group passing through the castle gate. It was drizzling. It was a day that would turn to sleet if it got any colder. It had been a busy day since dawn, the day after the battle, a day to smile because they survived, and he saw those who had given them that ordinary day returning. Enkrid and the madman platoon, silhouetted against the hazy sunlight. The heat of the battlefield had died down, and everyone felt a bit more relaxed. Even so,
Colony Slayer.
someone opened their mouth first, and the gathered soldiers near the gate all shouted in unison.
Colony Slayer, long live the Madman Platoon. Hurrah, you're handsome. Take me. Damn it, thank you so much.
It was praise for those who had shown unbelievable strength, a mix of relief from surviving threats and crises, and the joy of victory. The drizzle soon turned white, like frost. It was a day when the temperature had suddenly dropped, so this was expected. Torres looked at Enkrid, standing in the rain that had turned into a mix of snow and sleet. A wild horse with a strange aura followed behind, and the group was carrying some kind of chest. Rem was holding the glaive that the monster leader had used, but none of that mattered. Torres stood upright, looking at Enkrid. He put his feet together and pressed his right hand to his waist. Then he bowed his head in a show of respect. It was a military salute, a gesture of thanks for saving him in this territory. Enkrid merely nodded at Torres and passed by. Rem, following behind, asked,
Do you know any good blacksmiths? A dwarf has recently arrived on the outskirts of the market. Oh.
Rem continued walking, and the rest of the platoon passed by indifferently. The cheers did not hold them back.
There's a dwarf, you say?
A master of metallurgy, smelting and crafting. Of course, not all dwarves are masters of metallurgy. Elves have their own metallurgy, and among humans there are outstanding craftsmen as well. But on average, dwarven smelting and metallurgy are superior and fundamentally excellent. So, if a dwarf had wandered into a human territory, it would naturally draw interest. They needed someone with such skills at that moment. Even though dwarves are known to demand excessive prices in jewels or payment, no one here was opposed to spending krona to buy weapons. Isn't it better to spend a bit of gold to get a good sword? For those who live by the sword, a good weapon is another arm, and good armor is another life. Enkrid felt his right hip was a bit empty.
It would be nice to have another sword.
A sword made by a dwarf would be very useful. He had grown accustomed to wearing various pieces of armor, and he had recently obtained some beast hide under armor that wrapped around his body like bandages. As they were heading back, Lord of Martai himself came to express his gratitude.
Thanks to you.
Think nothing of it.
Enkrid responded politely. The Lord turned away, telling them to rest.
There are no private rooms. It's as bleak here as in the border guard.
Torres followed behind, explaining. Anyway, they were guided to their quarters, and Rem brought up the subject of the dwarf. The quarters were a communal room with 8 beds lined up. As Torres had said, it was bleak. Other than the 8 beds, there was no furniture. It was a place meant only for sleeping.
It's a wild horse, so it won't even consider going to the stable should we stake it down and tie it up here.
A soldier skilled in handling horses approached, watching the wild horse's reactions. As if understanding what was being discussed, the wild horse shook its head.
Leave it be.
Enkrid spoke roughly. He just felt like bringing it along, and so he did. That was all. If it wanted to leave, he would let it go, of course. The wild horse had no intention of leaving. With monster blood mixed in, it had become half-beast, making it impossible for its herd to come near it. The monster blood instinctively instilled fear in other animals. For the same reason, it couldn't go into the stable. Similarly, the wild horse had to leave its home territory. That was the only way the rest of the herd could live safely. As the leader of its herd, it was its duty. It even handled the disposal of the burning skull. Though technically, it was the human in front of it who dealt with it. Just as Enkrid felt an unusual sense of kinship with the wild horse, the horse felt a strange closeness to Enkrid. The world called this a bond.
You've done well, rest now.
It looked as if the human and the horse were having a conversation. Rem observed this and then spoke.
Is that thing also going to turn into a human?
It won't.
It was different from Esther. It was just a gut feeling, but he was certain.
Don't be so sure. Who would have thought a panther could turn into a human?
Rem made a comment that could make a dog bark, and everyone ignored him. As they unpacked and sorted out the chest, Kreis returned.
What's with this?
As soon as he arrived, he saw the wild horse loitering in front of their quarters. He circled around and couldn't take his eyes off the horse, speaking with a worried look. Whatever he had been up to, even in Martai, he seemed busy. His big eyes were filled with disbelief.
It's a horse.
Enkrid replied. The wild horse, standing idly without being tied up outside the barracks, caught Kreis's attention.
Does it also turn into a human?
Kreis asked. It clearly didn't seem ordinary. He asked because of the example of Esther.
It's a male. Just a heads up. If you approach it from behind to check, you might get your head smashed.
Enkrid warned in advance. Esther was fierce too, but the wild horse now had monster blood in it. Who knew if Kreis might end up with a horse's hoofprint on his chest?
Do you think I'm as stupid as Rem? Who called you an idiot? I'm saying I don't check a horse's balls from behind either.
It was a precaution.
Kreis was quite an oddball too. Kreis wasn't normal either.
Hey, do you realize I'm standing right here listening to all this?
Yeah.
As soon as Rem spoke and got his answer, he smacked Kreis on the head.
Ow!
Given the conversation, Kreis didn't pout after getting hit. He just rubbed the back of his head a few times, and then moved on to the next topic. Specifically, as soon as he entered the quarters, something caught Kreis's interest. It had a scent, the scent of jewels.
What's with that chest?
Jewels.
At Enkrid's answer, Kreis's eyes changed. Whenever Krona was involved, human eyes had a mysterious way of turning into gold coins. He whistled as he checked each chest.
Quite a lot.
Have you seen the dwarf who came into town?
Watching Kreis admire the jewels and gold, Ragna asked. Was Ragna interested too? Tired of using second-hand swords? While considering this, Kreis responded.
Oh, I was just about to talk about that. It's a real dwarf. It's my first time seeing one and they look quite beautiful, actually.
Beautiful? To understand what he meant, they would have to see for themselves. They spent the rest of the late afternoon unpacking and practicing isolation techniques to loosen their bodies. They decided to visit the territory the next day, specifically to see the dwarf blacksmith. Enkrid ate dinner and closed his eyes. It was time to do what he always did, reflect.
What if I hadn't lost track from the beginning?
He had lost the monster leader, so he had to chase it, and during the chase he experienced a peculiar focus. He had always mixed focus and sensory techniques, but at the moment he threw his sword at the leader's head, it was different. Did will move? No, that wasn't it. Now he understood what will was. It was willpower, an intangible force based on it. It's a mystery difficult to explain in human language. In some ways, it's like a spell or magic, but it's a power limited to the individual. For those who train their bodies, wield weapons, or use their fists as weapons, it manifests. So that wasn't it. When capturing the monster leader, when he threw the sword at its head, Enkrid felt something crushed and fused into one. He could see what to do next, and it felt as if his 5 senses had fused into something new.
It's called sensory technique.
He recalled what Jackson had taught him. In reality, it was countless sparring matches with Pell, continuous experiences, life lessons, mindset, and even the rejection achieved through will. It all came together to make it happen.
There's no need to divide it into the gate of sixth sense or the sense of evasion. It's just sensory technique.
Damn Jackson. His explanations were as clear as mud, just like Rem's. At the time, it didn't make any sense. Enkrid closed his eyes and merged his senses. He entered the realm of the sixth sense. Even without dividing his senses, he could hear, see, and feel. With his eyes half open, he saw Audin praying.
Following the will of the Father, shepherd the young lambs and keep them from losing their way.
Was he praying for Ragna? That wasn't important. Enkrid felt as if he had opened a third eye. Even though Audin wore a thick tunic and a wide coat over it, Enkrid could feel his body, that solid muscle, the explosive strength, the unwavering posture even while praying. His body was something perfected. As this sensory realization came to him, Enkrid found himself partially opening his mouth, lost in thought. He saw a new direction in the isolation technique. By merging his senses, a new path became clear.
If you don't train your body, it's all useless.
The beginning of everything is the body. It was an unexpected realization, but it was also something he already knew. Revisiting what he already knew was also a form of realization. Enkrid determined the direction to train his body. Of course, he would need Audin's help. Rem watched Enkrid, who had come to this realization, with a quiet gaze.
Hey, did you say there's a temple in Martai?
Rem asked. Kreis, who was sitting next to him polishing a few jewels, answered.
Yes, there is.
It's smaller than a temple, but there would still be priests. Despite the bad rumors, they were there.
That guy is definitely broken.
Rem muttered. Kreis glanced up at Enkrid. His mouth was half open, drooling.
He's the same as always.
It wasn't the first time they'd seen him like this. While no one paid much attention, Dunbachel made a big decision, half opened her mouth, and tried to drool just like Enkrid. From now on, she would learn and follow everything Enkrid did. The first step was to do what he did, to understand if there was any reason behind it.
Do you want me to crush your head? Why are you copying him?
Rem scolded. Dunbachel stubbornly drooled. Indeed, a madman. The door to the quarters was half open, and the wild horse, peering inside, thought for a moment.
Should I go?
It briefly considered leaving. It wasn't just acting on Enkrid's words for no reason. The horse had been very intelligent and clever even before it had monster blood, so it could discern the situation. If it wanted to leave, now was the time. The horse thought so. If you understand, then move. Act immediately.
If you think of even the slightest clue, act on it right away. If you delay, you'll lose it and miss the opportunity. What you've lost usually won't remain yours. If you miss it, it's gone. Even the smallest realization should be ingrained through action.
He remembers it being a short lesson. It was a swordsmanship training school just before entering the southern continent, and the instructor had brown skin. Enkrid did as he said. He got up immediately. He had returned to the domain today, regardless of what he had done before, or whether it was time to sleep or anything else. None of that mattered to Enkrid. When he got up and went outside, the sun had already set. The sleet had stopped, and the ground was muddy. The torch next to him was burning, illuminating the surroundings. The wild horse he had saved looked at Enkrid. Passing the horse without a word, Enkrid started to move his body in front of the barracks.
What muscles are important when wielding a sword?
The entire body is important. The forearm muscles of the arm will enhance gripping strength, and a strong waist will be the cornerstone for a centrifugal strike.
When cutting through flames.
His thoughts continued, reaching the moment he cut through flames, the manifestation of a spell through a scroll. It was a marvelous and mysterious thing, but the only reality before him was the fireball coming at him. He recalled the movements from that time. He swung his sword, making it perpendicular to the ground.
Back.
In Enkrid's mind, the muscles of his body split and scattered. He blended his senses into a single, intuitive sensory realm. From then on, he observed his body, making it a continuous process of training. Enkrid mimicked chopping wood. It was the movement needed now. At the same time, he observed the movement of his muscles. It was the beginning of change, the foundation of progress. It was something that would become a cornerstone. There were those watching from inside the barracks. It was the madman platoon. Dunbachel, drooling, slurped it back into her mouth and got up from her seat. Perhaps imitating that would yield something?
Please stop. Sister, you'll harm your body.
This time it was Auden who stopped her. He stepped forward to restrain her. He thought how fascinating it was to see a person performing what seemed like lunatic antics under the moonlight.
How does this sinful man bring me such joy?
Auden murmured to his master, his father, his god, and took a step. What was Enkrid trying to do now? It was a process of finding joy on his own, not just doing what he was taught. He was observing and identifying the lacking parts of his body, walking the path of new training. How could he not be joyful watching that? Even though he had taught the isolation technique to many, or even something inferior to it, it was a realm no one had reached. Finding people who enjoyed the process of teaching and learning the isolation technique was a very difficult task.
Wait, balance, inhale deeply, and make your stomach full. If the center of your body is disturbed, it's all useless, brother.
Auden said, standing beside him. Enkrid absorbed his words. Yesterday's technique and today's technique would be very different. Until now, it was habit and inertia, but from today onwards, he would row his boat to the right direction, like a ferryman who found his course. Auden laughed heartily as he taught, delighted by this, so much that the soldiers passing by the barracks turned to look. Their pupils trembled violently.
What's he doing? They say he came back today? Why is he holding a stone and dancing? Is the madman platoon called so not because they fight like mad, but because they're really mad?
Such comments went around. It didn't look normal to them. Inside the quarters, Rem quietly pulled the door shut.
The cold wind is coming in.
Dunbachel regretted the closing door. She wanted to see more of what that human Enkrid was doing.
Hey, ignore it. Don't pretend to know. A person should go mad gracefully. Why is he doing that in the middle of the night? It's embarrassing to watch.
Rem's words received no response. They were originally like that. Dunbachel couldn't resist and went outside. Rem didn't particularly try to stop her. In fact, he too had a lot on his mind.
Damn.
How could a person do that? He went into battle and fought. He didn't get excited even after showing unbelievable strength. He barely listened to the cheers of those he saved. He didn't covet even after seeing an enchanted spear. He was indifferent to gold or jewels. Then he went into a trance, drooled, and ran outside to do that.
Is that normal?
No, but that abnormal sights also stimulated Rem. Just in time, the spear imbued with flames had come into his hands. It was clearly a magical item. Thus, it could be easily wielded. The spear held some sort of lingering grudge, but Enkrid erased it. Rem reflected on what he left behind when he departed from his tribe. One day, he would have to reclaim what was his. As his thoughts continued, he began to digest the stimulation Enkrid had given him. Rem gripped the spear and delved into his world. There are moments when physical training is important, but there are also moments when refining and manifesting what one originally has is crucial. For Rem, it was the latter now, and for Ragna, it was the former. He, too, couldn't take his eyes off Enkrid. Even after Enkrid left, he stared blankly at the door, and even after Rem closed the door, he remained the same. It was the same when Auden went out, and when Dunbachel went out.
Is this what it feels like?
To feel your blood boiling? If blood actually boiled, a person would die. However, it felt like that. In the room that felt wide but narrow, he sat on the bed with his buttocks perched. Ragna felt the sensation of his blood boiling. His pounding heart told him to go out immediately and wield his sword. But he did not. The training sword custom-made at the border guard was pathetic.
Strength.
Ragna was a genius, and he had long since realized his own shortcomings. He had already understood the methods of training, but he needed the help of tools. Originally, he wouldn't have needed such things.
Look at that man.
He wanted to show the world a person like Enkrid. How could one not be disturbed seeing that? That's why impatience crept into the relaxed genius. It's a strong impression that made him walk a path he didn't want to take. Thus, Ragnar wanted to create his own tool. Wouldn't a dwarven blacksmith be able to create what he desired? Ragnar longed and hoped. To go further, this was an extreme stimulant that went beyond a mere desire to wield a sword. It felt like handling poisonous mushrooms or drugs that shouldn't be consumed. His heart and head shook and heated up, beyond his own will. The ones stimulated were not just three. Teresa's eyes were continuously shaking inside her mask. What makes that man move like that? The answer was within her.
The joy of fighting.
The instinct for combat, the blood of the giant stirred. Teresa also burst out the door. It seemed impossible to sleep without sparring with that man immediately. It would be an untimely duel under the moonlight, but would that matter? No, it wouldn't. Teresa burst out the door.
Why is she doing that?
Kreis, who was examining jewels and various items, looked up. Anyway, none of them are normal. Outside the open door, Enkrid and Auden, and next to them Dunbachel, were visible. Dunbachel stopped in a half-squatting position after hearing a few words from Auden. If she shook even a little, Auden would laugh and grab her shoulder with his palm.
It hurts.
Dunbachel said, "Pain is suffering, and suffering has the immediate power to make one speak."
It's meant to hurt. Sister, correct your posture.
Auden's voice was heard. Then Teresa mumbled something beside him. It was not audible. A few soldiers nearby glanced and watched, and the wild horse watched indifferently. Kreis felt some concern but ignored it. What he held in his hand now was a high-priced ruby nicknamed Red Flame.
If I sell this properly, it'll be worth more than hundreds of gold coins.
Was it some explorer's tomb? And they said there are more tombs like this on the continent. Should I switch to being a treasure hunter?
No.
That's something you shouldn't do, even if you have extra lives. No matter how skilled a swordsman is, stepping on a single wrong trap would immediately lead to knocking on heaven's door or swimming in hell's river.
It's better to stay here.
Enkrid is a source of upheaval. Sticking close to that commander might lead to finding more tombs, but there will be more events like this. For now, isn't the Border Guard Guild providing stable income? He wanted to live buried in gold coins. Kreis, his eyes turned to gold coins, looked outside and spoke to Jackson next to him.
Anyway, everyone's strange here, right?
He said, not realizing he was talking about himself. Normally, Jackson would have ignored or disregarded such a flowing question.
Is that so?
But an answer came back.
Why is this guy acting like this?
Kreis turned his eyes to Jackson. A similar flame burned in Jackson's eyes. Cold yet hot? Well, it felt something like that. Jackson was also stimulated.
What do you seek in the technique meant for killing?
It was a question his master had asked. Why did he ask that then?
You enjoy it too much. I don't know if this is something I should be doing. Well, it's not really my business.
The master's words resurfaced. He was broken in many ways, but there was no lie in his words. Jackson himself found joy in learning the techniques. Training in the art of killing was also enjoyable. After engraving the master's words and his past experiences, goals, and objectives into his heart, he had forgotten that joy. It wasn't needed. But now someone was fiercely pulling up a desire he had buried deep in his heart. Jackson's heart pounded as it did when he first held a sword. Desire and ambition combined to create a stimulant that made him want to swing his sword. What if he honed his sensory skills even more? He wanted to review and train every technique once more to progress further. The desire for growth surged within him. All of this happened because Enkrid ran out under the moonlight. Although it all happened internally, it was a moment that clearly showed a change.
Anyway.
Kreis shook his head and focused on his own work. Thus, the night of stimulation passed, and Enkrid woke up early the next day as well. In the past, he enjoyed using the isolation technique, but now he was so thrilled with training it that he was obsessed. Just moving his body felt like a special stimulant. After finishing his morning training, the Lord invited them to a meal.
Let's go fill our stomachs.
Enkrid took everyone along.
I have to thank you again, but what was that last night? Why were you doing that under the moonlight?
Even the Lord, who knew Enkrid, had to ask about the special night.
It was a good night for training.
Enkrid answered roughly. Detailed explanations would be pointless as they wouldn't understand. Someone like him couldn't afford to miss even the smallest clue. That's how he set his life's direction. His dream was now within reach. How could he explain all of that?
All right, fine.
The Lord gave up trying to understand. The breakfast was a feast. Well-roasted lamb, marinated pork ribs, catfish stew, butter and cheese, milk and wine, and clear water beside it. The highlight was the bread. Its white, soft interior truly justified Martai's reputation as the land of bread.
This is amazing.
Even Rem was impressed by the meal.
The blonde.
The Lord asked.
He's a person who loves to sleep in the morning.
Chryse answered on behalf of Ragna. Enkrid didn't care, and the Lord let it go. After all, they were all madmen. It wasn't unusual for them to ignore a call from someone like the Lord. Resting well and eating well were also important. Enkrid ate and drank without rest. Their comrades did the same.
They eat well.
The Lord expressed his gratitude to those who fought for his domain. Since taking over the domain from the former guard commander, he had gained a certain weightiness in his demeanor.
Are you leaving this afternoon?
No, we'll stay a bit longer.
When Enkrid mentioned that he planned to commission something from the dwarf, the Lord nodded and said,
The townspeople might be a bit rough, but I hope you'll manage.
What did he mean by that? With catfish meat in his mouth, Enkrid casually nodded. After finishing their meal, they moved their bodies again for a while. The effects of the previous night's stimulation lingered. They headed to the domain's market only after washing off their sweat. Chryse led the way.
I've already familiarized myself with the paths.
It was Chryse's habit to scout out escape routes in the surrounding environment. The first place they reached in the market was a small tavern. Martai's market was bustling, but the streets were narrow and crowded. There were newly built houses here and there, and buildings with round roofs, which were temples. Seeing this, Rem cautiously suggested,
Why don't you check it out, Commander?
but Enkrid ignored him. Entering the tavern, Chryse said,
The bread here is a delicacy. They call it rusk. It's sprinkled with sugar and butter, and it's really good.
He gave a thumbs up as he spoke, indicating its excellence. It was bread that wasn't part of the morning feast. As Chryse had said, it was excellent. It wasn't soft, it was hard, made by baking the bread twice. Wouldn't that almost burn it? Anyway, as long as it tasted good. They had rusk and slow-cooked duck for lunch. It seemed like they were only focused on moving, eating, and drinking. After lunch, they planned to visit the dwarf. While they were in the midst of eating, someone kicked the tavern door open and walked in.
What are you looking at? Give me a plate of bread.
Then he sat down, glaring at Enkrid. From the way he opened his eyes and his demeanor, it was clear to anyone that he was looking for trouble. The people of the continent often say this about the Easterners.
They are tough, stubborn, and incredibly persistent.
Hans was one such Easterner, and among these Easterners, those who remained in Martai essentially had the mindset of,
Let's see how well you do.
they held a grudge against the current lord. Hans was one of them.
Stop the colony? Damn, isn't this all rigged?
Hans, who was deeply versed in dice games, thought to himself, if dice games are manipulated, it's always the same people winning the game. Originally, whenever a threat appeared in Martai, they would often request support from the Eastern mercenary king. However, after losing a battle, the lord died. The commander changed, and since then the territory became subordinate to the border guard. Then suddenly, a big crisis struck the territory, but a few soldiers from the border guard came and dealt with it.
Damn, I don't like any of this.
To Hans, the entire situation was like a dog's penis. If the monsters were weak enough to be chased away by a few of them, wasn't it not dangerous in the first place? Unlike the soldiers who stood on the battlefield, Hans had become a local thug in the territory and had not seen Enkrid's battle. During that time, he was drinking and sleeping, considering the territory's dangers separate from his own safety. There were two subtly divided factions. The alliance between the Easterners and the Continentals also played a part in the poor flow of information. Still, those who needed to know knew everything, but Hans only heard what he wanted to hear. He was a typical fool. Hans's job was to lend his fists here and there to earn some silver coins.
If I go out and fight,
Couldn't he handle a few ghouls? A human-faced dog? It's just a dog with a human head, right? A single spear thrust would end it, wouldn't it? How could an Easterner be defeated by such a wild dog? As an Easterner, isn't it a virtue to be brave enough to kill a lion with just a sword? The mercenary king was like that. At the age of 18, he killed a lion with just a sword. It was a beast that had tasted human flesh, having killed dozens of people. This was the first story of how the mercenary king proved himself on the eastern plains.
They must have had some relic or pulled a trick.
One of his companions said, poking Hans in the ribs, encouraging him. He handed Hans a glass of wine, which Hans took a sip of. It was sweet, almost as if honey had been mixed in. It wasn't strong, but because he drank it while excited, he felt dizzy for a moment before it quickly passed. Hans tightened his anus to appear sober and said,
Tasteless, but it's good.
This is newly imported, isn't it nice?
His companion didn't seem to notice Hans was swaying from the alcohol. He just smiled. Hans nodded vigorously. His movements became exaggerated. He didn't notice his own changing actions. After the insignificant conversation, his companion kept talking.
He looks like an idiot in person, only having a handsome face.
In the meantime, women would swoon just by looking at his face. They called him the squad leader of enchantment. What kind of bullshit is this?
You know Lenny, right? She seems to have fallen for that enchanted idiot, too.
Lenny, the daughter of the tavern owner, was the woman Hans had feelings for. His insides were boiling, but everyone around him was cheering as if a hero had returned. It wasn't a situation where he could easily express his dissatisfaction, so he held it in. After the atmosphere cooled down, Hans heard that the enchanted idiot and his companions were at Lenny's tavern.
If you actually face him, he's nothing special. Hans, maybe you could.
His companion handed him the wine. As he gulped it down, he began to feel a newfound confidence. As the sweet, fiery liquid went down his throat and filled his stomach, something hot rose from his lower belly.
I'm going to beat that bastard up.
If not now, when will he show the bravery of an Easterner? Hans entered the tavern with this determination and glared at the man. Seeing him in person, he really did look like an idiot. He seemed more suited to being a noblewoman's bed attendant rather than a war hero. Hans also noticed Lenny. Her eyes never left the red-haired man with half-closed eyes and tightly shut lips. What the hell is wrong with him? Damn it! Am I supposed to just tolerate this? Hans was known as a local thug. He rarely lost a fight. Hans stood up. Thud! Bang! Standing up forcefully, his chair was pushed back and toppled over. In the tavern were the enchanted idiot and his companions Lenny and a few other villagers. Some of them frowned. What is that thug up to now? Enkrid found it amusing.
Is this trouble?
He asked with his eyes. Rem blinked in response. He felt awkward as well. Rem's eyes scanned their companions. Auden, Dunbachel, Teresa. Even just these three were not ones to be trifled with. And then there was himself. It's not something to boast about, but in the territory, it was rare to encounter someone who would easily pick a fight with him. Enkrid did have a handsome face. That could make him seem less threatening, but there had been a battle before. If anyone knew about that, if anyone had seen it, especially if stories had spread within the territory.
And yet he picks a fight?
What is this? Who is this idiot? Enkrid glanced at Rem and then sized up his opponent. His perceptive skills assessed his opponent within the realm of his senses. The signs of how he used his body, the development of his muscles, the position of his hands, his habit when stepping, even the continuity of his movements when he stood up and pushed the chair. After observing everything, Enkrid subtly extended his left hand forward and slid his right foot back. Anyone with eyes would understand what Enkrid's movements meant, but his opponent showed no sign of recognizing it. Really, not at all.
Hey, aren't you being too arrogant in someone else's territory?
Hans said.
Should I kill him?
Dunbachel asked. Enkrid then remembered what the Lord had said. Hadn't he told him to take it easy?
I will.
Enkrid spoke as he stood up. No one seemed interested. Hans's eyes turned even redder, or rather his eyes were severely bloodshot now. Not that it mattered.
You bastard.
The excited man charged at him. Enkrid sidestepped, dodging the swinging fist, and pushed against the man's forearm while lightly kicking his thigh. All the movements happened at once. They were natural and smooth. Seeing this, Rem and the others' eyes sparkled. It was an application of the fluid sword technique. He was performing it with his body, a technique he had recently become engrossed in. As Enkrid pushed him away, the man looked like he was going to smash his head into the tavern table. But Enkrid didn't let that happen. He grabbed the man by the back of the neck and pulled him upright. The man had swung his fist once, and now couldn't understand what was happening. Tink pushed him away, staggered. trying to stand. Damn, what is this? Hans became even more furious. Unable to control himself, Hans reached for the knife at his waist.
If you draw that, you're dead. There's no turning back from that point.
Rem said, chewing on a rusk with his mouth covered in sugar, making him look surprisingly convincing. Hans didn't hear him. He couldn't live without stabbing the man in the belly in front of him. Normally, he would have come to his senses by now, either dropping to his knees or running away. But he didn't think of that at all. He had to kill them all. He couldn't live under the same sky as this bastard. His excitement went too far, and his brain stopped thinking. It wasn't natural. Enkrid sensed that something was wrong with the man's demeanor. As he considered breaking a bone, it happened. With a crisp sound, the man fell forward, his hands still on the knife, eyes rolling back. Jackson, standing behind him, laid him down and opened his eyes wide, sniffing his mouth.
What are you doing? Do you have a hobby of sniffing people?
Rem asked. Jackson ignored the comment and spoke to Enkrid.
Someone used drugs.
Drugs? He explained that it was the kind that could leave someone a lifelong cripple if misused.
He was made less discerning and hypnotized.
His tone suggested he was an expert in the field, and it was an accurate diagnosis. Clap, clap, clap. Someone clapped.
Impressive, you figured it out.
A man with a leather canteen at his waist, 2 knives on his right hip, and a short sword on the left sword belt approached. With every step, the short sword in its scabbard swung on his thigh. Just by his gait, it was clear he was quite skilled. Far more than the guy who had just charged. Enkrid stared at him without responding. What's this now? Despite no one reacting, the man continued to smile as he approached. He looked like a rat.
Greetings,
he said. No one responded. Even Rem, who didn't enjoy silence, just crossed his arms and watched. His mouth still covered in sugar, he seemed ready to swing a misbalanced fire axe or the barbed spear once used by a centaur leader. Enkrid's senses told him Rem was ready. If left alone, he'd just die.
Who?
Jackson asked.
Oh, how should I introduce myself?
The man pretended to ponder, clasping his hands before his chest and then letting them drop theatrically. Should we just kill him? Rem's hesitation was palpable.
Wait.
Enkrid said. The only one who didn't understand was the man. He nonchalantly continued.
I'm from the Black Blade Bandits.
The Black Blade Bandits were a group of thieves. Enkrid let his arms hang loose. He'd never had a pleasant conversation with them. The man waved his hands.
I didn't come to fight. I just came to convey a few words.
The tavern workers and a few customers were there. The man spoke without regard for them.
Do you have any thoughts of converting?
The man asked with a smile, and Enkrid pondered the question before replying.
Do you want to die?
I really came here with good intentions. You know, the Black Blade Bandits don't know the meaning of surrender. What you've seen so far was just a taste.
He was saying that the idiot sent under the influence of drugs and hypnosis was just a preview.
It's truly a good proposal, Anne. Please reconsider.
The man was serious, and so was Enkrid.
So you want to die?
Rem, who was listening from behind, burst out laughing. He could roughly predict what Enkrid would keep saying, knowing his mannerisms and his way with words.
The Black Blade Bandits won't give up. I'm just a messenger. And Dunbachel, don't you have a debt? Do you think you can ignore it and walk away?
The Black Blade Bandit messenger said this, sticking his neck out to look at Dunbachel. Dunbachel had exercised force as a mercenary for the Black Blade Bandits. She had taken on assignments and contracts and received payment in return, but that no longer meant anything. She had been wandering, seeking death since then. But could that be called a debt?
Yes.
Dunbachel nodded. For the first time, the Black Blade messenger flinched.
This crazy woman has gotten even crazier,
he thought to himself.
This is really troublesome. Let me reiterate. This is a truly, truly good offer. We can overlook Dunbachel's issue and give you anything you want. For instance, if you want to become a knight, you can join the knighthood.
The messenger spoke, and Enkrid maintained a blank expression. A knighthood, so they knew his goal. He had talked about it here and there. This was proof that they had done their homework.
What about it? Will you refuse this offer too?
The man asked with his eyes. Enkrid, with a cautious attitude, opened his mouth.
So, do you want to die or not? Why aren't you answering the question?
As Rem laughed for the second time, the messenger's expression changed.
These bastards, should I really show them a lesson?
He subtly moved his fingers unnoticed by his opponents. It was time for a few assassin to drop from the roof. It was silent. Huh? The man moved his fingers again, unnoticed by his opponents. Then something fell from the roof with a swoosh.
Eek!
A scream erupted from one of the tavern workers who saw it. 2 bodies. Their necks were pierced. The red-haired man standing next to them spoke up.
It seems that's all the tricks they had.
Damn it, what's this now? Everyone knew they had a hand in this, but how did they spot elite assassins so easily? The messenger's expression soured further.
If you kill me, the Black Blade bandits will.
Whoosh, thud, wham, splat, thud. The messenger reached for a smoke bomb at his waist as he spoke, and Rem, without missing a beat, threw his axe. His right hand moved so fast it was a blur. Enkrid's heightened senses caught every detail. The misbalanced fire axe, instead of bursting into flames, gleamed as it flew, embedding itself in the messenger's head. The force sent the Black Blade bandit's legs flying, his body crashing into the tavern wall before collapsing to the floor. That was all. The Black Blade bandit's messenger was now a corpse. The tavern maid screamed once more at the sight, and Jackson, with practiced hands, searched the body. He found several neatly folded papers, a leather pouch, a smoke bomb, poison, and a knife. Inside the neatly folded paper was a strange powder. It seemed to be a drug used for hypnotizing people.
Don't worry too much. If you contact the barracks, they'll come and clean this up.
Enkrid said while standing. It was just a minor disturbance, like a fly interrupting a meal. Although there had been a commotion, he didn't think it was a big deal. He was just impressed by Rem's axe-throwing skills and Jackson's quick movements.
Well, it seems the Black Blade bandits are making moves, brother.
Auden made a nonchalant comment, and the group started to leave. Regardless of the Black Blade bandits' tricks, they were on their way to see the dwarf. That was their original purpose anyway. The dwarf was in one corner of the forge, eating wine, cheese, and bread. The clanging of metal and the heat didn't seem to bother him as he dipped his finger in the melted cheese and licked it. News traveled fast within the territory, and it seemed that while they were at the market, word of what Enkrid had done had already spread. The dwarf looked around at everyone and spoke.
You seem to be good at fighting.
His tone was bold. Enkrid looked at the dwarf. How old is this one? Different races often had ages that didn't match their appearance. He could be older than Enkrid, but he looked like a short girl of about 15. Of course, she wasn't just any girl. She was a muscular young girl, with a neck that seemed thicker than his. Her face, however, was quite pretty with delicate features. Kreis's comment about her being pretty wasn't unfounded, but by general standards, she wasn't exactly a conventional beauty.
Do you think she's pretty?
Rem teased, to which the dwarf replied while chewing.
I can hear you, Greyhead.
She had a fiery way of speaking, and Rem was just being Rem. The barbarian smiled softly and asked Enkrid,
Are you interested in a dwarf trophy? Because I think I just found a freshly dead one.
What's your business here?
The dwarf ignored the barbarian, and Rem didn't make a fuss, simply letting it slide. From the first time he heard it, despite the harsh words, he felt it wasn't genuine. Enkrid appropriately stepped in and spoke.
I want to buy a good sword if you have one.
Enkrid didn't beat around the bush. To be honest, he thought it was quite interesting. Does he know how to fight? It didn't seem like it. His posture, hand movements, position, and actions led to this conclusion.
Is that so?
The dwarf wasn't picky. She simply looked Enkrid up and down. It is known that dwarves don't judge humans by their appearance, yet her gaze lingered on Enkrid's face and wouldn't leave. Kreis, watching from behind, thought,
No way, does she?
Surely she hadn't fallen for the commander. A slight sense of unease crept in. As everyone knows, dwarves don't care about human appearance or beauty. Instead, they look at the refined inner self. They judge a person's character based on their eyes, attitude, and habits. With long years of wandering the continent, dwarves can gauge someone's nature just by looking at how they open their eyes or their manner of speech. Although not a spell, her unique dwarven ability and experience allowed her to see part of Enkrid's inner self. It was truly grand, whole, and beautiful. Smelting is about extracting and refining ore. Blacksmithing is about heating and hammering metal to make tools. With long years of making and refining various things from stone and iron, she developed an eye for this. In her eyes, Enkrid was a stone. But he wasn't just any ordinary stone, absolutely not.
What is this?
Despite being chipped and chipped again, it didn't break or wear out. It was a stone that didn't erode or decay. An incomprehensible, in other words, a human and an ore she was seeing for the first time. So it was fascinating to her. At the same time, it was a reason to move the dwarf's heart. Mystery, novelty, and newness always arouse a dwarf's interest.
Hey, I'm not going to kill you, so fix my axe.
Next to them, the arrogant barbarian spoke. He nonchalantly handed over an axe that had something embedded in it. Didn't this bastard just say he was going to kill her? She judged that he wasn't serious. The dwarf's unique insight could easily discern the truth of words, so she thought he was a strange guy. He wasn't serious, but she sensed that he might swing his axe if he got upset. The dwarf's eyes scrutinized him too.
What is he?
He looked like a stone burning on its own, a dawn that incinerates everything around it. To avoid being burned near him, one had to be equally strong, or someone had to block and withstand the flames. Who was blocking them? Needless to say, a stone that doesn't burn or erode. A stone with black hair and blue eyes was like that. The dwarf's gaze swept over everyone. The humans around him were all peculiar. One was like true silver, imbued with divinity, forged and hammered for tens of thousands of hours. Another was like a sharpened blade of dark iron. There was also a grayish gold, which they say can only be seen if you burn thousands of stones. Ash gold, a rare metal she had only glimpsed once in her life. No, true silver, dark iron, and grayish gold were all rare metals. Do such things come to mind just by looking at them? Who are these people? The dwarf's eyes didn't waver. Their will is firm and steadfast, not easily flustered by anything. They also have immunity against most mental magic. The dwarf looked around. The most peculiar among them was just a stone. A stone that gets chipped but doesn't erode, wears but doesn't break. That stone blocked the flames, embraced the true silver, repelled the darkness of dark iron, and encompassed the grayish gold. She saw these individuals standing, each displaying their unique characteristics. It was indeed a curious thing. The dwarf's curiosity was piqued, and she asked,
What's your name?
Enkrid thought that the dwarf must be much older than he initially expected. There was something in the way she spoke.
Enkrid.
All right, let me see your hand.
When Enkrid calmly extended his hand, the dwarf meticulously examined the calluses and joints of his fingers.
Quite diverse.
She wasn't wrong, Enkrid thought. The skills he had ingrained in his body were indeed diverse. He had stuffed his body with everything he could learn. Sensory techniques, the heart of the beast, the heart of great strength, the isolation technique, and even the swordsmanship derived from evil spirit of the cursed sword. Looking back, he had tasted a bit of all swordsmanship styles. Recently, he had been obsessed with the fluid sword technique and immersed in physical training. Even without considering the will he had learned, he had a considerable amount of techniques ingrained in his body.
Okay, good. I have a decent sword on hand, so I'll fix it up and give it to you. And you? Just need to balance the axe handle and center of gravity, right? Why do you carry that around? The iron is good. I'll melt it down and remake it for you. And you don't seem to need anything. As for the rest of you, well, yeah, you. What do you need, Grey One?
Does this dwarf always talk so much? However, amidst all those words, the dwarf's unique insight was evident. If a frog was adept at talent scouting, the dwarf excelled in insight. She identified exactly what each member of the group needed at a glance. Although the nickname for Ragna was odd, they let it slide since it was a dwarf.
A long, thick sword with proper balance.
Ragnar responded. He didn't care what the dwarf said, he simply stated his needs. He didn't bother with anything else due to his clear purpose. It was the same when bandits came. He ignored them because it didn't matter. Instead, Jackson moved, and Rem was as usual. Auden just smiled calmly. The dwarf nodded.
Got it.
So they decided to fix Enkrid's sword and the fire axe, and also to melt down and remake the centaur leader's barbed spear. Additionally, she would personally craft a sword for Ragna. Enkrid had heard that dwarves were exacting craftsmen, but seeing how accommodating this one was, he thought rumors couldn't be trusted.
Hey, didn't you say even a dagger was too precious for me?
Kreis said from behind.
That's because you're too subpar. It's a waste to give you something I made. Just grab one of those human-made ones over there.
Wow, such favoritism, Kreis muttered. He genuinely looked hurt. He was never particularly attached to weapons, so why was he suddenly asking for a dagger?
Want me to buy you one?
Enkrid asked.
No, it's fine.
Then why are you so fixated?
It's been a long time since I've been rejected.
Rejected.
I'll tell you later.
Kreis said, and the dwarf chuckled. Cute guy, her expression seemed to say.
But it'll take about a week to do all this, maybe faster.
The dwarf said. Enkrid looked around the forge. Everyone who had been hammering the iron had stopped and was now watching them. There were 2 craftsmen metal lined up along one wall, and the furnace's flames pushing back the cold. Despite not being there long, the intense heat was making him sweat.
Give them a few silver coins. You have to pay to use the forge.
At the dwarf's repeated words, Kreis handed over a few silver coins. Seeing this, Enkrid added a few more. He wasn't trying to curry favor, but there's no such thing as an appropriate amount. In matters like this, Enkrid didn't skimp on silver coins. Kreis didn't mind either. With the amount of krona the commander had earned on this expedition, they wouldn't be short of money for a while. Not that they had been short of money before. The man who seemed to be the owner of the forge nodded after glancing around.
Use it as much as you want.
And for the cost, hey, Big Eyes, give me that pouch of jewels you have in your coat.
The dwarf revealed her insight by immediately guessing Kreis' nickname.
You want this?
Kreis couldn't leave his precious jewels lying around, so he carried a few in his coat.
Yeah, hey, I'm giving you a good deal.
The dwarf spoke in a casual tone. Her speech was varied, which also hinted at her age.
Give it.
At Enkrid's words, Kreis looked distressed, but then nodded. As he handed over the pouch of jewels, Kreis paused and asked,
But how did you know I had this?
What do you think of a dwarf's sense of smell? I can smell expensive stones from a mile away.
So dwarves can smell such things. It didn't really matter. Enkrid didn't give it much thought. They would have to stay here for about a week. They returned to the market. The heat from the forge had raised their body temperature, momentarily warding off the cold. The cold air quickly pierced their bodies again, but Rem still had a smiling face.
I decided to love this stone.
Thanks to the warming stone in his coat, he really hated the cold. Ragna walked silently without looking around.
Do you suddenly need a good sword?
Enkrid asked, curious.
Yes, I do.
He was curious about the reason, but didn't ask further. Of course, it was because of Enkrid. What had the night of stimulation left them? A desire for growth, knowing they could achieve it, brought them joy. Ragna enjoyed this too. It was an emotion and experience he hadn't felt before. Previously, knowing he could achieve it made it boring, but now it was the opposite. So he needed a good sword, one that fit his hand and body. He hoped the dwarf's craftsmanship would provide that. They continued to browse the market, smaller than the border guard's market, but still bustling in its own way. It was becoming a trading hub connecting the east. Kreis chatted with a few merchants here and there. Some spoke comfortably, suggesting they were acquaintances. Some of those walking around recognized Enkrid and saluted. They were soldiers who had seen him wield his sword and chase the centaur leader. There were quite a few patrolling soldiers. They seemed to be focusing on internal security, moving in groups of 3 or 4. They bought and ate a few pieces of white bread, as well as some with raisins. As they continued to browse the market, a young woman blocked their path.
They told me just to deliver the message, just deliver the message.
Her hands trembled with nervousness.
What is it?
Kreis asked gently, trying to calm her.
The Black Blade won't let this go.
Her anxious eyes swept over them. Her legs shook as she finished speaking. She was visibly terrified.
It's okay. It's okay.
Kreis reassured the woman, asking her a few questions. Someone had approached her, tossed her 2 silver coins and tasked her with delivering a message. Her younger sibling was sick, and she desperately needed those silver coins. Kreis even asked for her name and handed her 3 more silver coins. When you need to save krona, you save. But when you need to spend it, you spend it.
If anything happens around here later, it would be great if you could let me know.
With his characteristic smile, he reassured her and sent her on her way. After she left, Kreis sighed deeply and glanced into the alley where she had disappeared, then spoke.
They don't seem like they're going to give up. Shouldn't we do something?
Kreis asked. Enkrid replied without hesitation.
Think about it.
What?
I don't know, so think about it.
Enkrid said as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Kreis felt that the commander had definitely changed in some ways. Had he always delegated tasks so well? He used to make requests that felt more like suggestions. His attitude had changed. As someone responsible for the unit, this was appropriate.
If they attack, we just need to split their heads. They'll probably just send some lowly assassins.
Shall we ask the god of war if it's all right to send these unruly ones to his side? I am Teresa the Wanderer, and I will cut down any thieves.
Rem, Jackson, Auden, and Teresa spoke in turn. Enkrid's gaze turned to Dunbachel.
What's the debt?
I borrowed about 15 gold coins in the end.
Why?
Kreis asked out of curiosity.
To have fun.
Spent 15 gold coins to have fun? Did she hire male courtesans in the capital and drink a lot of expensive liquor? No, she must have eaten luxurious food too.
All of it.
Oh, I spent about 2 coins and the rest I gave away.
To whom?
Kreis' speech became curt seeing how the krona was used, but Dunbachel didn't mind. For beastmen, politeness meant simply not stealing each other's food.
To passing kids or orphanages raising children.
She used the borrowed gold coins as she wished. Dunbachel, knowing she would likely die, had just done what she wanted. Of course, seeing abandoned children reminded her of her own situation, but she didn't mention that. Kreis was just astounded.
You borrowed gold coins from thieves and thought they'd let it slide?
Is she crazy? What can you do with 15 gold coins? If things go wrong, her head would be the first to roll.
Well, yeah, that's true.
This woman isn't normal either. After that, Enkrid and his group headed to the market. This place had a subtly different atmosphere compared to the border guard. Both the goods being sold and the people were different. Several gazes landed on Enkrid. They were individuals who stood out no matter where they went, due to their striking appearances and distinctive traits. It would have been stranger if they hadn't drawn attention. However, no one in Enkrid's group paid any mind to the market merchants, patrolling soldiers, wandering peddlers, or the few thugs who resembled the ones they had previously beaten up.
Those look like furs?
Everyone was only interested in what caught their own eyes. Rem's gaze lingered on the furs. Enkrid's attention was on a pair of leather pants the peddler had spread out on the ground. Auden bought a small wooden figurine from a young sculptor that seemed to be carved into a rabbit. The fact that it couldn't be confirmed as a rabbit indicated it wasn't of great craftsmanship. As they continued browsing, 3 thugs approached them. Were they going to try something similar to that idiot from earlier? Kreis looked on with interest. He was curious about what these fearless idiots would do, but nothing happened as he expected. One of the thugs prostrated himself on the ground in front of Enkrid. It was a bold move, not caring about the filth on his clothes.
That guy wasn't one of us. He was some drifter who had been hanging around the territory for about half a year. His name was Vento.
Enkrid looked at him with a gaze that said,
Who's that?
Prompting the thug to explain. He was referring to the guy who had attacked them in the tavern earlier.
Hans didn't know anything, and so please forgive us. Yes, I'll punish him on behalf of the knight.
Though his words were disjointed, he seemed loyal. Enkrid nodded. The man who had attacked him under the influence of drugs and hypnosis appeared to be Hans.
Handle it, and it's not over yet.
What?
Enkrid said as he brushed past him. He was headed for the leather pants that had caught his eye. Rem also grabbed the furs.
Big Eyes, give me a few gold coins here.
Don't just buy it without haggling.
Kreis shouted as he ran over. Auden, watching quietly, spoke to the thug leader.
He's not a knight yet, you rascal.
As he spoke, his bear-like hand patted the thug's right shoulder. Teresa patted the thug's other shoulder and said,
If you mess around, you'll die.
a short warning. Depending on who says it, the level of threat varies. To the thug, Teresa looked like someone who could easily snap his neck. While Kreis haggled and the others bought what they wanted, Ragnar said he would head back first. But Enkrid told him to stay put as it would be annoying to look for him later. Rem added a comment, leading to a brief commotion with Ragnar. Dunbachel wanted something similar to the pants Enkrid had bought, but since the merchant said there were no exact matches, she bought the closest thing. Of course, Kreis handled all the bargaining, securing everything at reasonable prices. As they returned from the market, They saw a bald man standing in front of their lodging.